Welcome back to the Unacceptable News. I'm your host, Justin Bush, and look at this flower that's in my garden. Tonight's story is about the 2006 UFO over the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. So when this situation happened, there were many witnesses, not just on the tarmac, not just pilots, but there were outside witnesses. Those outside witnesses got very little press during this event because it was a much more sensational story that you had these career professionals that had witnessed something strange. This case happened on November 7, 2006 at 4:15 p.m. and it was alleged that it happened over gate C-17 for the United Airlines company. So 12 employees were said to have been present at the time and location of this event. Now, some of the people worked on the ground, some of the people were pilots. This case really highlights internal issues with our government. So historically, we know that many people that have been witnesses, whether they work in a government or outside government, have alleged to have been threatened and silenced over the years. Now, in this case, when you have 12 firsthand witnesses that work for this company, you have a multitude of other witnesses that were simply in the local area at the time of this event, and then you have the allegation of being silenced after the event. Historically speaking, the FAA has this reputation for anytime a pilot sees a UFO or has an encounter, they threaten them with psychological evaluation. We know the government has used this tactic with military pilots. But since we now have all of these military pilots, these aviators from large commercial companies coming out with their stories, they're releasing firsthand video evidence of these anomalous objects. We know the government themselves have released and declassified several of these objects witnessed from fighter aircraft.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Oh my gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's like look at that thing. It's rotating.
When you're looking back in time, almost 20 years at this case, you can really see how they use their power to silence many of the witnesses involved. So for a lot of people that don't know, in 2001, Stephen Greer started his disclosure project with a major event at the National Press Club. People ended up calling this event the UFO Congress. There were several former congressional members that were there to preside over this meeting of whistleblowers, most notably people from government service. One of their major witnesses at the time was Mr. John Callahan, who was the FFA head of accidents and investigations at the time. He reported that when a close encounter happened with a Japanese airline over Alaska, the United States government sent people in to investigate. They collected all of the evidence in the case, and then they silenced Mr. Callahan. They told him and multiple other people that this event never happened and that they were sworn to secrecy and that they could not report on the issue. Now, in 2001, Mr. Callahan released documents from the incident. They were copies, and when the government came in to seize the material, they did not realize that there were some copies of this data down in another office that Mr. Callahan had. So he was later on able to show how the government steps in and orders the FFA around.
My name is John Callahan. I'm a retired FAA employee. I was the division manager for the Accidents Evaluation and Investigation Division in D.C. About 2 years before I retired, I received a call from Alaska region where the region wanted to know what to tell the media. When I questioned, tell the media what, he says about the UFO, and it went downhill from there. What UFO? It turned out I told him what any government employee would do at that time was to tell him it's under investigation. And then I had them send all that data to the FAA's tech center in Atlantic City. The next day, my immediate boss, service director, Javi Safir, and I went to Atlantic City. I had just purchased a new video camera, and I videoed the event. And in Atlantic City, we had them play back on a scope, you would call it a scope, a plan view display, PVD, exactly what the pilot seen or what the controller seen, and we tied that in with the voice tape so we could hear exactly what the controller said and what he heard, and we taped it. We came back the next day, briefed the administrator, Admiral Ingen, on what happened. He wanted a 5-minute briefing. After we started the briefing, he wanted to know if he could see the video. We put the video on. He watched the video, the whole video. The next day, he set up a meeting for me to give a dog and pony show to President Reagan's scientific staff and whoever they brought over, and to hand off all that data to them. That morning in the FAA round room, it was either 9 or 10 o'clock, 3 men from Reagan's scientific staff, 3 CIA people, 3 FBI people, and I don't remember who the other guys were, along with all the FAA experts that I brought with me that could decide or talk about the hardware and the software, how it worked. We put on a dog and pony show. We let them watch the video. We had all the data there. We had all the printouts that the computer put out. They got all excited over it. When it was all done, the CIA, one of the CIA men told the people they were now sworn to secrecy, that this meeting never happened and this event never happened. When I asked him why, I thought it was probably just a stealth bomber at the time, he says, well, this is the first time that we have recorded radar data on a UFO, and these guys are going to get all excited, drooling over all this data. I said, well, you're going to tell the public about it? And he says, no, we don't tell the public about this. It would panic the public. He says, we're going to go back and study this. I said, okay. It was what he was going to do. Now, I've told this story many times, and I get sometimes funny looks from people. I have with me the voice tapes of the controllers that were involved, the FAA original tapes. See, after we handed this stuff off to the president's staff, the FAA didn't know what to do with it. We don't separate UFOs from real traffic, so it's not our problem. Okay? I have a copy of the original of the video that we took, which is rather interesting. And once the thing was all over, the reports started coming into my office, but because it wasn't an FAA air traffic problem, the FAA's report ended up on a table in my office. And it stayed there until I retired, when one of the staffers packed up all my gear and helped it move to my house. Also, in a box I found just a few days ago, in my 1992 tax return, I have the target printouts from the computer data, which, so if you wanted to return or look at every target that was up there at the time, you can now reproduce this from this piece of paper here. And it's called the UFO Incident, Japan 1648, I believe the number was. It happened on November the 18th, 1986. I'm prepared to go to Congress to swear before Congress that everything I've told you people and everything that is here is the truth. Thank you.
So even if you believe the FFA are a standalone organization, they are taking direction from other government agencies. He alleged that there were some suits, he called them perhaps CIA people, that showed up and essentially silenced him and the FFA in regards to this Japanese airline UFO incident. Now, later on in 2006, you have this O'Hare International Airport incident with the UFO. It was alleged this object came down, hovered for a period of time in front of a multitude of people, and then it shot straight up so fast that it punched a hole through the clouds. Now, shortly after that, when some of the pilots that were involved reported this object, it was alleged that United Airlines attempt to make them sign essentially secrecy agreements, non-disclosure forms, or otherwise they would lose their employment. It was also alleged that many of them were threatened with psychological evaluations, the same psychological evaluations we see military pilots that were threatened with over the years. Since the 2017-2018 release of documents from ATIP program that show that pilots are having encounters with these strange anomalous vehicles, we know that the government has used this tactic to silence pilots in the past. And since this event has taken place in 2017-2018 with the release of this information from the Pentagon, many thousands of pilots from all over the world are now sharing their stories. They're sharing pictures of these craft that they have been flying in close proximity to. We can show you a video or two of that. Now, with these pilots' open admission that they're having these experiences, the world has really changed recently. But this is back in 2006 when this type of thing wasn't allowed. So we have allegations of not only United Airlines threatening these people, but essentially that they might be called in for psychological evaluations to have their pilot's license taken away. So many of them were so afraid of the consequences of revealing what they had seen that day that when they reached out to news agencies, the only way they would go on interviews is if they were given anonymity. So they blacked out their faces, their names, and allowed them to testify to what they saw without actually showing who they were.
Come to Chicago's O'Hare Airport from all over the world. But do they come from other worlds?
You don't believe this was possibly your imagination?
It was definitely not my imagination.
Joe is a mechanic for United Airlines. While taxiing a jumbo jet to the hangar, he and another mechanic
Looked out the window in the general direction and noticed an object up in the sky, dark gray object sitting above the terminal complex.
Joe, which is not his real name, is one of several airport workers, some of whom have talked to the Chicago Tribune, who say they saw a saucer-shaped UFO hovering just beneath the clouds at the airport. He's the first to go on camera to talk about it since this happened several weeks ago. He wants to remain anonymous.
But you're sure it was some kind of object that normally would not be above O'Hare Airport?
I've been at O'Hare for quite some time, and let's just say that I've never seen an object in my time there that looked like this. And I'll tell you, definitely, it was not an airplane as we know it.
But it could be an airplane as another world knows it.
Possibly.
We brought in one of Chicago's top sketch artists
Followed the contours of the object.
to listen to Joe and draw a picture of what he says he saw.
More like an oval. Dark gray oval.
Because no photos have surfaced, and Joe doesn't know of any.
Now, it didn't say Goodyear on it, did it?
No Goodyear, no. That's a really good drawing.
Is that what it looks like?
Very much so, yeah.
Other witnesses told an organization called the National UFO Reporting Center that the object eventually shot straight up in the sky at a great rate of speed.
It looked like literally someone had poked a hole in the clouds. Just a round hole.
Joe thinks the disc is either a stealthy military project or a spacecraft from another planet. But
I find it very strange or very peculiar that somebody who possesses the technology to travel between star systems would sit over an airport in Chicago.
hard to argue that. A spokesperson for United Airlines says, "We are aware of what the employees said they saw, but this is not something United would investigate. Talk to the FAA," says the airline. The TSA and the Chicago Department of Aviation also told us to talk to the FAA. So we did. And an FAA spokesperson told us we too don't have the power to investigate. The FAA adds that radar did not pick up anything out of the ordinary, and the sighting might have been caused by a weather phenomenon.
And you don't believe it was a weather phenomenon?
Not at all. Not for a minute.
O'Hare has apparently been UFO-free since that November afternoon, although Joe now tends to pay special attention to that same patch of airport sky.
And that's really shows you the difference between 2006 and today. We have military pilots sitting right in front of a camera doing multiple interviews with the largest news agencies in the world without any fear of repercussions, whereas in 2006, the people wouldn't even come forward unless they were given total anonymity. So after this event took place, the FFA came out and said that this was just a special type of cloud. But what they didn't realize at the time when they were making that statement, that multiple photographs of this UFO were taken by people in the area when it happened, and eventually those photos were leaked to the public. So now that we have these photos and we actually know what this object looked like, you have to tell me, do you think that the government is right and this is just a cloud? Or do you think this is an anomalous object and they try to shut down anybody that would tell the story? If you'd like to support our channel, go to the description or in the pinned comment down below. That's The Unacceptable News. Don't like, don't subscribe, just run.